project manager, and all of these things. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about that. Hopefully you'll find this interesting, maybe you won't. Scrum.org, you know who we are, right? It's an interesting, I just put that slide up because we do lots of training classes we train about between 3,000 and 5,000 people a month, so about 5,000 people around the world. We certify, or certainly give assessments, not all of them pass, about 15,000, 20,000 people, about 12 million people come to our website. So a lot of people, right? We also maintain the Scrum Guide. The Scrum Guide is obviously the body of knowledge around Scrum, and generally sort of maintain that sort of body of knowledge. And we do that with an amazing group of professional Scrum trainers, PSTs, of which Barry is one, and Antonio is another one, and we have some candidates here as well that maybe will join our community. I think there's 7 PSTs in Brazil, right? 8? Oh my gosh, you see they're multiplying. Hopefully they're not multiplying. That sounds a little rude, but they seem to be growing every minute, which is really cool. And of course, I work for this guy here. What's interesting about that is I'm the product owner for Scrum with the 2 people that invented Scrum. You can imagine what that's like, right? What are you doing? That's not very empirical. Anyway, so we live in changing times. The world that we are in at the moment is continuously in the process of change. It would appear that all of them are changing whilst driving in Sao Paulo this evening. We can't help but see, when Amazon said they were going to get into the pharmaceutical business, CVS and Walgreens, the 2 biggest pharmaceutical companies, like chemists you go and get your prescription from, their stock price halved overnight. Halved. We see GE, a hugely successful organization, having a lot of problems at the moment. Their share price is under $10. It used to be in the hundreds. Sears, which is a huge department store in the US, is closing continuously. Very depressing. And then even the next generation of technology innovators, Facebook, are continually under threat. The security and privacy, the fact that they won Trump the election. No, we're not going to say that. The fact that Russian users seem to be their biggest revenue growth area. No, but ultimately they're under threat as well. So what we're seeing is it's not just about technology; it's about fundamental change. And there's a great book, that I recommend you read. Thomas Friedman, he wrote a book called The World is Flat. Some of you may have read that, about globalization. This is his latest book called Thank You for Being Late, and he talks about these 3 things. He talks about the market, digital globalization, the fact that your car has visited more places than you have. The instrumentation came from, Bosch, maybe, in Germany. The drive, transmission, well, that was put together in Mexico. The engine, well, that was built in a plant just outside Detroit. The windows, well, they were made in Argentina. The fact that we live in that kind of world is incredibly challenging, and certain politicians don't understand about the complex dynamics of that, but it has a huge impact. Climate change is the reality. 1 billion people will not have access to water within the next 10 years. 1 billion people. That's the top part of India and the bottom part of China. The Himalayan melt is not melting as much. It's kind of worrying. The world is changing in terms of population, and that has a huge impact, not necessarily in terms of the weather, but which it also does, but in terms of population movement, in terms of opportunity, in terms of where people are living and what they want. 1 billion people in Africa use cell phones. It's a huge opportunity, right? And then, of course, Moore's Law. Moore's Law continues to sort of astound us. Apparently, quantum computing works now, which is really worrying if you've encrypted anything. But ultimately, the technology is growing, continues to grow at an exponential rate. That maybe you bought a Valentine's Day card for your significant other. Good, because you're not there now, so that's even important. You gave them a card. But that has more computing power than put a man on the moon. You know, probably if it's one of those musical ones that annoys everybody until you throw it out and then just annoys the dustman. You know, that has more computing power than the Apollo mission. Incredible. You know, so there's a really interesting economist. She's Venezuelan. Her name's Khalida Perez, and she writes about these changing ages. She believes we're in the fifth age. You can argue if we're in the fourth age, but ultimately she talks about this changing, this technology innovation. You can see some of those innovation or those ages. Obviously, it started with the Industrial Revolution. You could argue there was some revolutions before that, but the cycle time was much longer. The Industrial Revolution started to speed up technology change because of automation and some other things. Then we had the age of steam. That was us Brits, right? Though I live in America, I am British and will always be British. That's what we are. You know, small nation, very confident. The age of steam and railways. Isambard Kingdom Brunel, which is a fantastic name. I wanted to name my pet that, but my wife said that. Wouldn't it be great to say, Isambard Kingdom Brunel, come and get your food? Anyway. So then we moved into the age of electricity, engineering. We're just moving out of this age, the age of oil and mass production. The age of oil and mass production. Oil, let's put that aside for a second, but let's talk about mass production for a sec. Industrialism, Taylorism, Fordism. Many of your organizations that you work in today continue to manage your work in that way. It's interesting. That's the rub. That's the challenge. That's ultimately the fundamental difficulty that many of you face on a day-to-day basis. Now you may, if you're a sort of history buff, realize that those middle areas, the universal thing that happened in those middle areas is there was war, large amounts of people died, and huge social unrest, or social sort of change. You know, the Civil War in the US, which you could argue was as much economic as it was moral. The Second World War and the First World War. The Les Miserables, you know, everybody knows about, you know, the Miserables, the song, you know, I'm Joe. But that was all about when you had to sell your hair for money, which would have made me very hungry. So ultimately, what we're in at the moment is a big area of change, and that has obviously implications on politics, has implications on lots of things, and I'm not going to go into any of those, but the most important thing is to think that it's hard and challenging. So guys, you are living in a very difficult, yet hugely opportunistic, and there's a huge amount of opportunity, but in a very difficult way. So these are some of the changes that ultimately are driving this. Look, we're moving from these types of investment cycles to these types. Efficiency, which is what the age of mass production is all about, is being replaced with innovation. We go from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. So I have a website that 12 million people are going to come to. 12 million people, and it's, guess what? It costs me $1,200 a month. I'm running it on Amazon, I've containerized it. I've actually got a large amount of latency. It runs as fast in India as it does in America. That's pretty cool. $1,200 a month. We live in a world of abundance now. We can do anything that we want to do. Specialization of labor, the efficient, you know, that role-based sort of like, the sort of Taylorism, the idea that we break down work to its smallest possible chunk to allow rapidly to assemble people to manage resources in the most efficient way. Process control versus self-organization and decentralization. Cross-functional teams versus specialization of labor. Management is king. Creators are king. Thomas Friedman wrote a really interesting book called That Used to Be Us. It's about the demise of the American way, which is kind of depressing when you read it. But it's actually not depressing, it's actually very exciting because he talks about this. Ultimately, as we move to more complex work, when we replace simple work with automation, this becomes the most important role in our organization. Everybody else serves those people. That's great for us because we are probably quite the creators. Organizations flip, where management is king today, to organizations where creators are king. We basically build organizations to allow them to be effective. So maybe a good way to thinking about the future is we're going from from these factories, these sort of models of, testing departments, design departments, operations departments, to more of these little organic things that respond to the environment around them. I mean, it's only a metaphor, but ultimately that's the kind of change that we're seeing. And that has a huge implication, right, to the way we work. Massive change to the way we work. These are some of the sort of pieces on the media about it, like the workers on tap, this idea of the gig economy, right? The idea of the future of work, massive technology, how is everybody going to look like Facebook? There's going to be bean bags everywhere, hipster jeans and beards, that's what that talks about. And we've got, New York Times and the work, but it's interesting. There's two kind of different views, but they're very similar. So Davos, the World Economic Forum, put together this model of what they think the future is. So you can see, very creator-oriented, very people-centric, very emotional EQ, sort of centric, judgment, service-oriented sort of world, negotiation, cognitive flexibility, elasticity. That's kind of weird, isn't it? Kind of a hippie kind of whoa sort of thing. But ultimately, you expect that you're going to have to learn different things continuously through your career. That's not what the industrial age was about. You got very good at a task, you then got very good at making other people do that task, you then got very good at making other people that made other people do that task, you then got very good at making sure, it became this sort of management hierarchical model, and we're moving away from that. Singularity University, some people may be familiar with the singularity, the idea that we're suddenly going to be downloading into a computer one day, but they have some interesting points of view. Agility and adaptability, entrepreneurship, if you're doing Scrum, you're the role of the product owner. The most successful product owners are entrepreneurs, right? Because they sort of manage all these conflicting stakeholder requests and do it in a very sort of ROI, value-based way. Curiosity, imagination, networks, entrepreneurship, good at talking to each other, good at working together. Some of these things become very important. Ultimately, though, we're moving away from this kind of work to this kind of work. And that has a fundamental different way of working. This is the Kneffen model. There's a guy called Dave Snowden that created it. You may be familiar with his work. It's very interesting. He's Welsh. So that's also very interesting, and he likes to tell you he is. Probe, sense, respond. Emergent process. Emergent ways of working. Specialized jobs don't really fit in this world, really. It's very hard. And that's not surprising, the new product game, is everybody familiar with the new product game? The new product game is a really cool piece of work that was written in 1986. It was actually where the term Scrum was first coined. They used Scrum, even though none of them played it. As you can see, a couple of Japanese gentlemen, the rugby actually is played in Japan, but not particularly well. They looked at how teams that were doing innovation in big innovative companies, how they formed and how they worked. And they coined the term Scrum to describe that sort of behavior where the ball is really value and work and going to the next thing. What's interesting about a Scrum, the reason why we call it Scrum and the reason why we have a daily Scrum is because a Scrum is formed in rugby when? It's formed when the ball stops moving either because of an infringement, somebody's died on it, some collapsed, somebody's broken some important part of their body and is being taken off by an ambulance. And the game, normally that gets more laughs. Anyway, yes, good. You've been driving in Sao Paulo, haven't you? I can see the end. We also have bad traffic, but we've also legalized marijuana. So the two sort of offset each other in a really cool way. Normally not to be combined. Can cause some issues and make traffic even worse. Interesting. But anyway, so the new product game really talks about a number of characteristics of these organizations. It talks about self-organizing cross-functional teams, autonomous teams. They found that in 1986. Many of you weren't born in 1986. I was 16. I looked a bit like Rick Astley, if anybody's aware of who he is. I was very cool, sort of Morrissey style. I was very trendy. Had a certain style about me. But in 1986, that's what then they discovered this. And we still have trouble doing it. Now you might say, well, that's only for innovation. But we know now that innovation happens all the time. And when we mean innovation, we mean extracting value out of opportunity. Sometimes that might be innovation because we're not working in the most efficient way, so we innovate the way we're working. Sometimes that's innovation in terms of delivering new products. Sometimes it's innovation in terms of the skills that we're using and the technology and the way. But ultimately, we're innovating continuously because everything's changing. We live in that world. And some of the things that they did. So Scrum focuses on 3 roles, right? Product owner, Scrum Master, and team member. 3 very simple roles. Now, often we get, oh, I'm a tester, I'm a project manager, I'm a business analyst, I'm a data analytics specialist. And why does everybody have to be a developer? Because often this is termed as developer. We kind of want to change it, but it's a long story that we can talk about today. Now, most organizations put Scrum in the context of 4 roles, including a leadership matrix. And leaders create an environment for Scrum to be successful. The reason why we concentrate on these 3/4 roles is really to build, we don't know what we know. We don't know enough about the situations that we're facing to tell you exactly what skills, what role descriptions in infinite detail we're going to need. But what we do know is there's 3 kinds of collections of work. There's somebody who defines value, right? Called that a product owner. Somebody that prioritizes, that tells the team what to do. Not in terms of how to do it, not in terms of the detail, but in terms of the direction they're going. We know that the group of people that do the work, that deliver value, I'd call them creators or developers, whatever makes sense to you. And then we know that delivering work in this complex world is incredibly hard. Scrum highlights 3 things: empiricism, self-organization, and continuous improvement. That's really hard to do. So we appoint somebody whose sole job is to help the team navigate this complex way of working in this complex environment. Now, normally what they do, and Barry taught me this in PSM2, is they make things, and I'm no Scrum Master and realize I don't really ever want to be one. It's like an awful job. You have to help people all the time. You have to make things transparent. How boring is that? I like to hear my own voice all the time. I don't like to make things transparent. You have to listen to people. My grandmother, who was the greatest woman in the world, told me that I've got 2 ears and 1 mouth and I should use them in that ratio. I ignore her advice on a daily basis. But ultimately, these 3 roles are what you need to work in an empirical way, to self-organize and to deliver value continuously while improving. That's all. Now, to do that at an organization, to do that at large, you need also probably another role to create the environment for these people to succeed. That's why Scrum is structured in that way. Now, these are roles, not job titles. Even though Scrum Master has been a job title, has become a job title, and so has Product Owner. That can confuse many people, because job titles are unique to your organization and to the culture and situation that you're in. These roles are universal across all organizations and all problem sets, assuming that you're solving complex work, assuming that that's the problem that you're doing. So what about you? How many people are project managers in this room? I know it's very embarrassing, isn't it? It's like, so just to help people, so I appreciate your courage. I used to be, I've got something to admit, I was the Rational Unified Process product manager. Oh, I know, there's an old person there. Please get him some help and a cane. But yeah, I know, it's embarrassing, isn't it? So don't worry being a project manager, it's okay. So how do you feel? How do you fit into this world? Well, project manager is a job title. But maybe you're a Scrum Master as well. Maybe you're some other things as well, I don't know. But ultimately, we have to think about your job title in the context of this. Now, there's a myth. Hang on a minute. And maybe certain Scrum practitioners have told you, we fire all middle managers, project managers are no more, business analysts disappear, testers disappear, and we all become developers, Scrum masters, and product owners. That's what some people say. That's not true. It's a myth. We care very deeply about job titles. Now, we don't know how to make your job title successful in your organization, but we do care because we need all the right skills to deliver value in cross-functional teams. We need that. Now, that means BAs, testers, project managers, subject matter experts, security experts, all of these bizarre titles that you've accrued over the years become relevant, right? We also know that you hire people in a market. Like if I go to Australia, I always have to say it like that. Now, ThoughtWorks was incredibly successful in Australia. So they created a role called the Agile Development Manager. Is that right? Or was it the Agile Project Manager? No, I think it's Development Manager. So if I'm hiring somebody, I have to use those words. Because if I say, I want this, and they go, what does that mean? Because people do pattern recognition, right? And that's how it works. Also, people want to understand career paths and development and all these things. These things are very, very important. You need to feel safe and valued. Now, I can imagine when you go home and talk to your significant other or go and talk to your mum or your grandma and say, and she says, what do you do? Or he says, what do you do? And you say, I'm a developer, I develop value. And she looks at you and says, that's great. You know Bob, your cousin? He's a lawyer. That's what I'm saying. Now, it turns out Bob's going to be replaced by artificial intelligence in the next year, and suddenly Bob's going to be cleaning the streets. But, like, well, we should put all lawyers. Anyway, sorry, no, that's not true. They're all lovely people. But ultimately, you need some recognition. And that means you probably need job titles. It probably means you need all these stuff. Now, maybe in 100 years' time, we won't be in this world, but that's where we are today, right? Unfortunately. And of course, most Scrum is happening in organizations that aren't agile. They're in transition. And have been for, like, in the case of Fidelity Investments, 25 years, which is kind of worrying. So here's the rub. We know that those 3 roles, or stroke 4 roles, are really important for delivering value. We know that you need to have some cross-functional team focused on delivering value to customers. We know we need somebody that's helping them make things transparent and deal with impediments and talk to each other and all those crazy things that apparently you need to do to deliver value in this complex world. We know that you need somebody that manages prioritization of that value. But we live in an organization where we've got job titles, where we've got management hierarchies, where we've got this structure. So how do we effectively, manage the rub? That's an expression, this sort of like pain, this friction, this inertia, this challenge. How do we do that? Oh, hang on, that's been up slightly. How do we manage the rub? That should have been earlier, sorry. There's some ideas that I'm going to talk briefly about over the next, whatever. You can't even look at your watch when you're holding this. It's sort of, I don't know how long I've, anyway, hopefully somebody can help me when I'm talking too much. Most important thing is the separation of work management, talent, skill management from jobs, from delivering value. So obviously the most famous example of this is the Spotify model, where you've got squads and tribes very aligned to value streams, and then they're supported by guilds and chapters, which I think is a little overkill, but we'll talk about that in a second. But ultimately, the magic of their model is that you have an organization that cares about you getting better at your craft, you getting better at your craft. Sorry, you getting better at your craft as well. And then you have an organization that's focused on delivering value to customers. Now, there's some tension there, good tension, but ultimately, you report into the value to customer organization. You're supported by the community of practice, squad, guild or chapter. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. But that separation is important. And the reason why it's so important in this modern world is because of transparency. It's very important at the work level that you're transparent. And that's very hard when the people that manage your promotions, the people that manage your skills, are the people that you're trying to be transparent to. By that separation, you allow an environment that's very open and free. Separate the roles you need for success from the skills you need. You need people that create and develop. You need people that define and order value. You need people that make work flow and make it transparent. People that create an environment for success. Concentrate on that. And sometimes a great Scrum Master will be a project manager. Sometimes it'll be a BA. Sometimes it'll be a developer, a traditional software developer. Sometimes it'll be, Jim the janitor. I don't know. I don't know. But concentrate on that. And people can wear many hats, but it's very, very complicated to do that, and almost impossible. We should never put a Scrum Master and a Product Owner in the same hat. It's just too dangerous. Because ultimately the Scrum Master's responsibility is to make work flow, to protect the team, all those sort of characteristics. Product Owner doesn't give a diddly about the team, they just want value delivered at the maximum space possible. That tension's great in Scrum when it works. Try to have one person, they get a little bit bipolar, it gets weird, they end up taking drugs, it's just awful. Or not. It's worse if they don't. Anyway, and then the alignment, the focus, aligning teams to outcomes. So we break away from projects to some extent. We start streaming along value streams. Streaming work along value streams. Now, interestingly, I've spent a little bit of time in Brazil over the last 2 days, and I visited 5 organizations. It's hard to tell. All I can remember is the trips between, really, which is worrying. This is happening here. We're starting to see this happen. We're starting to see organizations, the ones I've visited, adopt this sort of value stream kind of approach. It's really exciting. And then build a community around skills. That might be job title based, it might not. So, the famous Spotify model, I've talked about this, you know it. Tribes are aligned to value streams. You end up with a series of, now I actually don't like this. I think you've got too many product owners, personally. It starts getting very complicated in that way. Ultimately, you probably just have one product owner per tribe, honestly, and the rest are just sort of ways of amplifying that product owner. But that's just my take. You can decide whatever makes sense to you. I think they misunderstood Scrum, actually. And then, of course, you've got the squad, which is a team. We also, in Scrum, in professional Scrum, we have a concept of a nexus. A tribe is a bit like a nexus, and a chapter being a family of similar skills within a tribe, and then, of course, a guild, sort of like cross-organizational, value stream. It's a very simple model. What's interesting is, rather than the word, a lot of organizations are adopting the words without really thinking about what it means. So I don't care what it's called. What I care on is that sort of decoupling. I think that decoupling works very effectively. Now, at the end of the day, it's all about teams and teams of teams. So instead of thinking about job titles, instead of thinking about any of those things, think about teams. Now, the greatest thing about teams is that we want motivated teams. A motivated team will outperform a super smart team every day of the week. Google proved this, right? Project Aristotle, I think, basically analyzed all of their teams and found that the teams that were full of people from Caltech, MIT, all of these organizations, all of these academic institutions, were not as effective as teams where, community college and random people. What mattered more wasn't where they were from, it mattered really the psychological safety of the team, but more importantly, the purpose, mastery, and autonomy that team actually had. So Dan Pink talks about this. Some of you may have read his work. If you haven't, don't buy the book. You don't need to. It's a fabulous book, so if you've got time, buy it. But if you haven't got time because you're busy people and the like, just watch the TED Talk. It's awesome. It's everything you need in the TED Talk. There's some characteristics of these teams: opt-in, allow self-organization, allow self-direction, but provide a very clear purpose. Successful organizations really clearly articulate the purpose of that team. And that's super, super important. By connecting the team to the value stream, by making them super, super focused on the customer, not only does that create more value for that customer, but it also creates more motivation. Now, when I started work, I left university in 1992. That's a long time ago. And it was a great time, you know? And what happened was interesting. I went as a developer, right? A coder, a programmer, for an insurance company. But I didn't care about insurance. I wasn't interested in the customer. I cared about taking program change requests, PCRs, delivering them, or desk checking other people's PCRs, or building unit tests for my PCRs. That's all I did every day. I was not particularly motivated. But luckily I was young in London and it's better not to be distracted by work there. So purpose is super, super important. But by aligning to value streams, you clearly do that. The other thing that's interesting is this community model, or guild, or some whatever you want to call it, center of excellence. I saw today, actually, yesterday, one day. I don't know how long I've been here. This idea that you build this community around this. Now, what's interesting is the community ultimately are responsible for promoting it. So if the squad and the tribe are responsible for your bonus, you know, the work that you're doing, the value you're delivering to the customer, this organization is responsible for your promotion. Now, how do we promote people? Why do we promote people? We do not promote people because they're amazing individual contributors. We promote people because they help others to become amazing individual contributors. We have to step away from the idea that we hoard our knowledge to become a bottleneck, you know, to use it for power, and change to a model where we accept that we want to share that knowledge rapidly to others, one, to improve that knowledge, but also because that's how you scale ideas. That's how you help people become a better tester, a better software engineer, a better designer. You help them, and they help you understand by explaining it to them. If you learn loads. Mastery is an incredibly important element to the future of work. Now, I'm going to ask you a question you should ask yourself every day. Have I helped anybody today? Have I really stepped away from my day job and my ridiculous amount of meetings and sat down with somebody and helped them become better at their craft? Because that's where your value really grows. Now, of course, you have to balance that with the need of delivering value to your customer. And so most organizations have some sort of construct to do that. And it's not natural. It's actually pretty challenging. Helping others is actually hard. But it's where you really get. It's really where you feel happiness, in my opinion. Yeah. And promotion, status, all of that stuff comes from that, obviously. That means we have to move away from this promotion model. I'll just quickly read it to you. After spending many years on the job, working long hours, improving, never leaving before the boss, and mastering every strange nuance of the systems and processes, we're promoted to a management position, responsible for others doing that work that you know so well. So you tell them how to do it. After time and proving that you can play the political game, you're promoted to manage those managers. Slowly over time, you get promoted higher and higher until you retire. Changing jobs just changes where you start. The game always continues. That is not the future of work. The future is something very, very different. Cross-functional teams aligned to customers, delivering value, creating value every day. How you get promoted is by helping others. How you get promoted is by building an environment that helps others get better at their craft. So which journey are you on? Are you on a customer sort of journey? Are you on a creator kind of journey? Are you on a process, transparency, coaching kind of journey? Barry could give you lots of great advice on that journey. I could probably maybe help you a little bit about this, you know, and I'm sure there's many people in your organization that can help you on that one. But ultimately you have to pick your journey, right? What excites me is this. The reason why I travel to crazy places like Brazil is because I want to learn from people like you. I'm really interested in what you guys are doing. I'm trying to listen more. It's not going well, but I'm doing my best. And I'm trying to understand why you're number 4 or 5 on our website thing, considering we only have like 7 pieces in Portuguese. Actually, probably have a few more, but this is cool. You know, Barry loves this. You might have read the Stances paper. You might see his liberating structures work. You know, that's what he gets really excited about. I've got interest in some of those things, but pick the journey that makes the most sense to you. I'm speaking for Barry. Is he still here, or did he leave when I mentioned something about Scrum that was completely wrong? Anyway, yeah, he left. But that's, you know, super, super interesting. Pick which journey you're on. Now remember though, even no matter what journey you're on, you have to become T-shaped. That means everybody cares about the customer. Everybody has that broad set of skills. Many people think the product owner is the customer. No, they're not. They're responsible for determining the priorities the team is going to focus on. The team has to learn about the customer. We just launched Professional Scrum with UX, working with Jeff and Josh. Some of you may have read Lean UX. Fabulous piece. Sense and Respond is even better. Actually, I really love Sense and Respond. I liked it so much, I paid them to build a class with us. So we built a class that really helps everybody on the team, give them the skills, the techniques, the practices to focus on outcomes, to focus on the customer, whether it's empathy mapping, whether it's customer journeys, whether it's personas. These are just some of the techniques that I'm trying to learn every day. That's very important. Now, obviously, over time, you'll become more pie-shaped. Or maybe you become more cone-shaped. I'm aware of cones, I just don't use one. Thank you. Maybe on the cat occasionally. But the idea that you add many specialist skills, the idea, that's super cool. But ultimately, you still have to care about the customer. Now, this was some research we did with McKinsey that we found when we look at the big 5 psychological tests, etc., and look at work values, we found something that was really strange. We found that agreeableness was one of the most important characteristics of agile team members. Now, bizarrely, Google reinforced this in their study that happened a long time before the study that we did, that I could have just read and not done all the work on our study, but we'll ignore that for a moment. So, this is a problem that most teams tend to hire rock stars that don't work very well in teams. In America, we have an entire culture around this. Number ones, right? Top of class. You know, top of my class of, you know, Stanford MBA or whatever. So we hire these people. So what's really interesting is that actually the most successful teams have a culture of psychological safety that allows agreeableness. People are agreeable. They might not agree with each other. That doesn't mean they don't have opinions. That doesn't mean they're a pushover. But it means that they say yes and, not yes but. Yes and, not yes but. So in my position, I'm very fortunate that I get to travel the world and talk to organizations. One organization was in Boston called CRISPR. You may have heard of it. It's a way of manipulating genes. They use viruses to change your chromosomes, to change your genes. So they're focused on, probably their most famous thing is genetic blindness, right? They've actually found a cure for genetic blindness. So basically using a virus a bit like the flu or maybe like AIDS, but they actually have a mechanism to inject it into a person, and the person's genes will change, which will ultimately result in the optic nerve reconnect, etc., etc. How cool is that, right? Genetic diseases are horrible. Horrible. Your baby's born with something that they can never. It's not like falling off your motorcycle. I mean, this is awful. They can fix these things. The biggest challenge that they have. So they're growing. So Bill and Gates, Melinda Gates have given them loads of money. They've got all this money. So they're growing vastly. So I met their PMO. They've just got a PMO. Their biggest challenge is, guess what? Not technology. I mean, they've got a lot of technology challenges on delivery mechanisms, protocols, the FDA, compliance, all of this stuff. Yeah, they've got all of those challenges. But the biggest challenge that they have is people working together. Scientists apparently don't like sharing. Apparently the entire culture of science is based around being the primary author on research pieces. So what does that encourage you to do? Not tell anybody about your stuff. Now, to solve these problems requires cross-functional teams. It requires geneticists, it requires big data scientists, it requires mathematicians, it requires people that know stuff about biology, it requires chemists. They've got all of these people from MIT, from Harvard, from Yale, from all these really cool universities to work together. And guess what? Nothing is happening. Or lots of things are happening, but who the hell knows what it is, and they don't actually work together to deliver value. They would argue with that, by the way. But ultimately, that's what their PMO said to me. Agreeableness. This idea of building an environment for transparency, this idea of psychological safety becomes so much more important than your skills. Super, super valuable. So, what does this mean for organizations? Number one, we need to align our teams to customer outcomes. Call them products, call them value streams, call them customer journeys, call them whatever you want. Ultimately, you need to align your products to value. The most important skill for teams is to know the customer. So if I walk around any of your Scrum teams when I'm doing one of my emergency visits, which I've been doing a lot of after traffic jams, I've been running into organizations and I've been looking at the boards. It's always in Portuguese. Apart from, it's funny, the headings of the boards are like, done. And then it's loads of Portuguese underneath. I'm like, wow, isn't there a Portuguese word for done? And they're like, what, we can do that? Would that be Scrum? I'm like, anyway, but when I also run around looking at boards, I also expect to see pictures of customers, personas. I expect to see empathy maps. I expect to see value statements. I expect to see a mission. I expect to see team values that build transparency. I haven't seen many of them. Every single Scrum team has a Scrum board. Love it. Great. Really important. Maybe you want to read a bit more about Kanban, about work time, but anyway, but really good. But they also need to start really driving the customer and really driving the psychological safety of the team. Values, I'd love to see personas. Has anybody got personas up on their boards and next to their boards? That's a bit sad. So how about, okay, you can completely ignore me, everybody does. And fair play, I totally understand that. My wife is a very good specialist. Happy Valentine's, son. There's only one product owner in our house, and it is not me, just for the record. But anyway, I try to make things transparent. She says that's a silly idea. I'm like, okay. But how about everybody goes back to their teams and says, hey guys, maybe in your next retro, let's think about the customer. Let's create a customer persona. Let's think about the outcome that customer cares about, that we're going to help them with. That'd be really, really cool, eh? Why? Because it makes you excited when you're like, hey, we're helping Bob, or John, or Jim, or Claire. It's really good. I'll tell you a story, a little one. And I know I'm overstaying my welcome. I'm going to wish through this story really importantly. So I was speaking at a German pharmaceutical company. And I was speaking to their agile transformation. So they had there's about 600-700 people in the room. And they had this big kickoff. They were very German. And it was their sales and marketing value streams. Really boring. So these guys' job in life is to sell more pills than you need. That's what I was thinking in my head. So the guy the CEO comes on and talks. Now, the CEO is actually running a business of I think they're like $16 billion business, 17, huge business. I'm like, wow, got the CEO. I mean, only for like 12 minutes, but they got him. I'm like, that's cool. So I'm waiting to talk. I'm going to do one of my inspirational talks. I was getting myself all limbered up, eating Mars bars, drinking Coke, getting into the mode, like you do. Slapping myself. Only the weekend. No, but so I was getting really excited. I was about to talk, but the person before me was something called a customer advocate. Now they sell a multiple sclerosis drug. So this person was in a wheelchair, and she's stage 4 customer. So I think her name was Elizabeth, but I'm not promising. So it was a very emotional talk. She comes on. Now, sales and marketing are responsible not only for selling it, but they're also responsible for customer advocacy and basically building this sort of like ecosystem of customers and delivering protocols to them and connecting people up. That's one of their mandates. So they have a Facebook knockoff that you, as a customer, you get access to that has, knowledge base and all that. It's a bit like that. It's also got a social side. Really cool product, right? I didn't know any of this before this conversation, so I'm like, oh, that's cool. She comes up and she talks about middle of the night, 3 a.m., how much pain she was in. Apparently multiple sclerosis gives you a large amount of pain. And she was contemplating suicide. So suddenly the room goes hush, right? And she proceeds to tell him about the use of the protocol, the use of this website thing, this knockoff, this Facebook equivalent. And the fact that she went on there looking for looking to help, looking like for meditation, or could she use paracetamol, or whatever. And she found somebody online. She started a conversation about her pain. Now, because it supports multiple time zones, there was somebody who was online in a different time zone and helped her. They talked for an hour. We talked using messaging. She didn't commit suicide. That product helped her stay alive. I mean, talk about knowing your customer. You can imagine in that room, there's people crying, and it was Germans. How did they cry? Who knew? I didn't. It was a complete shock to me. I mean, yes, a couple of their soccer players have cried, which is fair play. 99 Man United, Bayern Munich, might remember that game. Anyways. Nobody does. But their teams that were building that, that was mine. I built that Facebook thing. That's what I did. I created that messaging thing. Elizabeth used my thing. Saved her life. You can imagine how motivated they were. Now, I'm not saying that you're saving people's lives every day, right? Some of you are. But some of you are in insurance, some of you are in banking, some of you are building, I don't know, fleet management software. I have no idea what you're building or product. Try to understand the value that you're delivering. Your products do make a difference. Try to take that up, create a persona that describes that. Help your teams understand that. Not only will you get better products built and better value delivered, but you'll also be a lot more motivated. Now, words of wisdom. If you're ever giving a motivational talk, do not follow somebody that's just about to die that's talked about suicide. Hi, I'm Dave. I'd like to talk to you about Agile now. People are crying still, there's tissues, people are clapping her and hugging her. I'm like, let me tell you a story. Yeah, damn it. But it ended up being fun. Germans cry. I like it. So, hang on. Customers, teams, line to customer value. measurement based not on work. Velocity is rubbish. It's not rubbish. It's a useful metric for the team. It's a useful idea to see if things are flowing. I prefer to use cumulative flow. I prefer to use cycle time. They're just the things that I'm really into. But ultimately, the measures that really count are none of those things. They're value-based. Now, I tend to concentrate on 3 value-based metrics. I tend to worry about current value and how that's changing. That might be, if it's an internal system, how satisfied the customer is. If it's an external system, how much revenue is coming in, etc. I tend to concentrate on cycle time. So I want to know how long an idea takes to get in and out. So how long that cycle, however that means to your organization, where it starts and where it stops is always a matter of debate. But I'd love it if it was from the idea coming in to when the customer gets it, the end user or whatever. And the third one is how much innovation I'm delivering. So a lot of work that I do is technical debt, is because of changes in laws or whatever. But what percentage of the work that I'm delivering actually is valuable? What is it, new features, etc. They're the things I really care about, and I want to see them continuing to improve. Alignment of products also means that management has to change to not be the kings anymore. They need to be the servants to the creators. That doesn't mean they're not, doesn't mean they're not super important. They are super, super important. But their importance is through the people that are delivering value to customers. That means that, you can go and tell your mum or your grandmother not that you're a manager, but that you're delivering amazing value to customers every day. And she'll still say that you're an idiot. Your cousin Bob is doing much better. Anyway, work and talent management. You need to build an organization that supports you. You need to build an organization that has teeth. Most communities of practice are just people that buy pizza occasionally. That isn't their job. Their job is to hire new talent. Their job is to find mentorship, to do Match.com inside your organization. Their job is to take apprentices and turn them into journeymen and then turn them into masters. Management concentrates on building and maintaining an environment for agility to thrive. That's a responsibility of management. That's measured in terms of how agile the organization is in terms of those value metrics I talked about earlier. So, what does it really mean? I love that picture. I have no idea why I used it there. That was pretty much me growing up. I was that little girl. That got me into software. I wrote some books. It's not all bad. Yeah, damn that other little girl. So, find your destiny. Find your journey. Scrum Master, you are more about enabling flow, driving process, helping others learn, removing impediments, raising transparency, doing liberating structure, all of that kind of stuff. Coaching, which is awful. If you're into that, Scrum Mastery is your life. Love it, enjoy it, become great at it. Change the world every day through helping others. If you're passionate about solutions you provide, the problems that you solve, the customer. If you care deeply about competitors, you read the Financial Times every day because you're so interested in how GE is doing or whatever your company is doing, then become a product owner. If you care very much about how, the technical, JSON queries, containers, Kubernetes, if you care very much about design thinking and principles around that, it doesn't mean that you can't do some of the other things, but ultimately then maybe that path is technical. So you're a team member, you become a master of your craft and you help others do it. If you want to glue it all together and spend your entire life stressed, then maybe leadership. If you like sniffing glue, I'm sorry, no. If you like gluing things together, then leadership is your mission. I have no idea why people want to be leaders. I guess because they get paid more, but it's a painful life. And you don't deliver any value and you spend your entire life trying to deal with the problems of the people have created. It's great. So, Scrum and Agile is 3 things. Empiricism, self-organization, and continuous improvement, right? That's all it is. Nothing else. To do it at scale requires discipline. It requires a value system that creates transparency and allows people to work together. The Scrum values is a great place to begin. It requires a maniacal focus on the customer and delivering value to that customer. And it requires you to help others to be successful, to grow the craft, etc. To work in this world requires, this future world of complexity requires us to work in that way. Job titles and specialization of labor do not naturally connect, but skills really do. I would recommend that you think about the 4 roles required to be successful in delivering value in this complex world. But remember, the customer is king. Everybody needs to understand that customer. Remember Elizabeth. Actually, I can't remember her name. Was it Elizabeth? But it's going to be from now on. I was so emotional, I couldn't remember anything afterwards. Decouple work management from people management, build community to support that, and focus on learning rather than the job title. And helping others learn. Oh, you're right, okay. Bottom line, most organizations are a mess. Transition. Focus on building skills, get close to the customer, you'll be sorted. Everybody wants to be a Scrum Master, it's awesome. Management is transitioning, so that's always a disaster. Help them go through that process. Agile is new to HR, help them understand it. And that is it. That's what I wanted to share with you. Hopefully this has been enjoyable. Hopefully this has been a little bit informative. Hopefully you've got some anecdotes that you can go home and impress the cat with, or your boss, whichever one is less trouble. We've got a little bit of time for some Q&A. Maybe, I hope. Has anybody got any questions or comments, or was this completely left field? You're like, my God, this guy's mad. I am a little mad. I apologize. Anything? Any questions? How's it all going then? What about your persona? Why haven't you got personas up? What about that velocity thing? How many people are Scrum Masters? If I was Ken Schwaber, I'd say, my people. I wouldn't. How many people are product owners? My people. Just remember, product owners are the most important people in the universe because they define value and decide the order of that and tell you what to do. How many people are developers or team members? Okay, I know you're the most important people, really. I hate it when I have to admit that. But you wouldn't know what to do if it wasn't for product owners. Just saying. Any questions or comments? Come on, guys. I know it's late. I know it's Valentine's Day. I apologize. Gentleman with the beard. Have you got we've only got one, so I guess I have to run up here. Which means I'm here at any point. No reason to be quiet.
I like it the way it is. It's really and I want to hear from you what we expect for the future of all of this. Thinking that we are entering a real
That's a really interesting question. What's the future? And it's a really interesting question around Scrum. You know, you said and you made a hypothesis that the future is not about frameworks. And you're right, to some extent. So you may have seen that Scrum.org has created a class called Professional Scrum with Kanban. It's actually running tomorrow, actually, here. Not here, I mean, that would be strange, but somewhere in Sao Paulo, probably a mile away. That will take you 4 hours to get there. Now, what's interesting is a lot of people say, "Oh, we did Scrum, ooh, yeah, and now we're doing Kanban. We're post Scrum." And you say, "Well, that's really interesting." You say, "That's kind of cool." So, what are you doing? How often do you plan? Oh, we plan every 2 weeks. I mean, gosh, true. We call it loading the board, though. All right. Okay, you do that every 2 weeks. Cool. How often do you get stakeholders in? Oh, yeah, they're really busy, so we can't get them continuously. We get them every 2 weeks as well before we do planning. Oh, okay. And how often do you do retrospective? Actually, this is something they tend to say, oh, we stopped doing retrospective, it was too disappointing. We never actually improved it. Okay, well that's, but you're doing Kanban? Yeah, we're doing Kanban. Interesting. And do you meet and talk about the board every day? Yeah, we do that for 15 minutes. Same time? Yeah, same time. Okay, cool. And who tells you what goes into the order of the board? Oh, we have this product manager. Oh, okay. And they own the work? Yeah. We tried actually having lots of people tell us what to do and keep changing the board, but that just got annoying. I never worked in Scrum either. I'm like, okay, cool. Sounds like Scrum to me. It's funny, good Kanban is good Scrum is good Kanban, good Agile. Will the frameworks disappear? Maybe not. I don't know. Obviously, I'm biased. Scrum is 16 pages. Jeez. It's not hard. The ideas are universal, right? They're empiricism, self-organization, continuous improvement. The values are good. You can pick different ones if you want. I want humor as a value, but apparently that's like too nice. Ken and Jeff are like, this isn't fun, this is work. Okay, so. Ultimately, I think that the frameworks may go away. However, the frameworks are the best and easiest way to deliver the ideas. They reduce complexity. A great example is, hey, when do we have this meeting? This daily meeting? Okay, let's spend an hour working out when we can have this meeting every day. Oh, let's change it on a Friday and make it, and suddenly it starts getting more complex. I'm not saying that Scrum is the only way. It really isn't. Kanban has great ideas, but ultimately, the reason why we have that cadence is to reduce complexity. The reason why we have those roles is because we think those responsibilities are very important. You have to add loads of practices on top of all of this stuff to make it effective. Continuous delivery, test-driven development, behavior-driven design, emergent architecture. All of this stuff is incredibly important to deliver value, right? I personally think that the frameworks will become less the focal point, and people will step back and say, let's not get religious about this. Let's concentrate on the essence. A great example is SAFe, right? Dean Leffingwell is the reason why I live in America. He actually hired me and moved me to America. So he's cool. My wife sometimes disagrees, but I think he's genuinely cool. Are you still here? Oh, yeah, sorry. SAFe can be implemented in a very waterfall way. It can basically replace one set of complexity with another set of complexity. You can implement SAFe in an incredibly agile way. However, the decision is yours. You need to have those intelligent conversations. Is a program increment and PI planning every 12 weeks really right for you? Is how we structure the roles with a separate product manager and a separate product owner right for you? Why have we decided to do that? Well, we're doing it because of scale. Well, hang on, what ultimately is the problem if you do that? Well, you end up with multiple people trying to make decisions, and communication bottlenecks, etc. Okay. Is that more of a problem than trying to share the information? Making explicit decisions is the important thing. Frameworks, if done right, allow you to do that. Now, I'm not saying Scrum, we've done a great job of explaining why the idea is, because we've only done 16 pages. That's the reason why we have a community. That's why we have PSTs. That's why we have the body of knowledge of 200, 300 books that explain that. But ultimately, it's the ideas that the frameworks are trying to express, and then the decisions that you're taking when you implement them that's key. I want to see more intelligent decisions made. Like less. Great example. We only have feature teams. That's the only way to align. Is it? I'm building a car. Is that the right thing? Oh yeah, well they're subsystems. Well, hang on a minute. So now they're not feature teams anymore? we tried with Scrum to keep it to the least possible set of things that allow you to get empiricism, self-organization, and continuous improvement. The reason why we did that was to reduce complexity. The reason why we did that was to highlight those things. You need to make these things explicit. You need to make these decisions and choices explicit. Release trains have value in certain situations. It's the only way of grouping work and in very complex environments. But they're a compromise. You have to accept that compromise. And that's okay in certain situations, but we need to make, so are frameworks dead? No. Is blindly following them dead? Yes, I hope. Let's make intelligent decisions about the uses and, do we have a Scrum Master? Oh, my team's awesome. Do we need a Scrum Master anymore? Okay, well, if you stop doing retrospective, maybe you do need to have one. But, that's a very logical argument. The reason why you have a Scrum Master is to facilitate flow, to its transparency, etc. Barry can tell you, I'm not sure. But, so that's an interesting question. Maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong, but the reason why we did it was for these reasons. Product owner is the same. Some people say, no, we just need a team, dude. Maybe you do. Sometimes it's better. Democracy is an incredibly slow process. Sometimes it goes horribly wrong. It's proven in the United States of America and Brexit. So, Winston Churchill says, if you ever want to question democracy, talk to the average man. So the point is that you have to make these decisions. It's your choice. Don't forget empiricism. Don't forget self-organization. Don't forget continuous improvement. If you do, then you're not going to be agile. Hopefully that answered your question. And gave, more. That gentleman then back down. You look like a product owner. Are you sure you're not a product owner? You look like a product owner. You're wearing a jacket, product owner jacket. It's our uniform. Okay, good. Not at the same time.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Sounds great to me. Decrease the importance of the job title, but how can we handle about the ego of the person?
Ego. Ooh. Damn those Brits and Americans, eh? Yeah, ego is really interesting. I don't really have an answer. What I tend to find is that I make things transparent to people. So ego is the reality, particularly in a male-dominated. I have to say the best teams are diverse. The best teams are a combination of gender, orientation, color. One of the best things about Brazil, sorry, I just slight aside, is that look around this room. It's awesome. Brazil's fantastic because of diversity. People from Italy, there's lineage. There's people from Germany. There's people from Caribbean. There's people. It's just awesome. Those experiences make us all richer, right? Now, it is likely that you're going to have people that have big egos. I have a little bit of one. You may have noticed. The best way of dealing with that is humor. And start laughing at themselves a little bit. Transparency or mirroring, as so bringing things back. Good coaches learn lots of techniques for dealing with that. Ultimately, we have to try to decouple those egos from the values that they deliver. And the best way to do that is to focus people on value. The first thing is to make them aware how people perceive them. And I know it sounds a bit hippie, and I used to be a good software guy, so I'm finding this a little odd, but asking questions like, hey, dude, when you said that to Bob, how do you think it made him feel? It's horrible, isn't it? I always feel a bit dirty saying that. And you go, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. And I say, not as half as uncomfortable as I am. So how about you write it on a piece of paper? All right, I'm going to write my opinion on a little piece of paper. Let's swap and read. Because we're maybe not comfortable about having these conversations. This is Brazil, we hug. We kiss each other. We use chow completely wrongly. You're designed to do this. You're like, hey, dude, let's get drunk and talk about what an idiot you were. That's kind of your culture. America, it's much harder. Much harder. Scrum and Agile requires a very important ingredient to be successful, called human beings. Many of the characteristics of the industrial age have stopped us from being human beings. Our education system has discouraged it because that doesn't create great workers. We have to step back from that and help people to become more human again. God, that was a hippie moment, wasn't it? Again, marijuana, Massachusetts. But it is a challenge. People are a challenge. People are the reason why this doesn't work. Look at those scientists at CRISPR, right? Just think what they can do. And they know they can do it. But ego gets in the way of that. I don't know. Did that answer your sort of question?
Yeah.
Coaching's actually really important. It's awful, isn't it? That gentleman there had a question. Hello.
Dave, I was going to ask you the biggest difficulty of your career, but I was
Biggest difficulty of my career? Getting up every morning. What's up?
Yeah, I think that it's easy. Maybe it's not so easy, but it's easy for you to talk with your people, with like Scrum masters and this kind of people. Like we are your people. But for example, how is difficult for you? How difficult is for you to talk with, for example, C-level or people that, for me, it's very difficult. For example, in our company, we work in a big company here in Brazil, and it's easy to talk like with my people, with our people.
Yeah.
But for example, C-level with this kind of level is difficult to talk about Scrum. They don't read so much. Maybe has a different way to talk. I want for you to talk about your difficulties.
So it's an interesting question. So ultimately the question, to get to the essence of it, it was, how do you talk about this stuff to C-level? Now, you could probably ask the people I've been with for the last day, because I've had lunch and meetings with C-level, CEOs actually. I didn't talk about Scrum once. I did, I said I'm from scrum.org, so that was the only bit. And they said, oh, that sounds good. I talked about why. I talked about value. I talked about alignment. I talked about measurement. I talked about success. I talked about the unicorns. We all want to be a unicorn. Brazil has a couple, right? Cool. Isn't this a unicorn? Wasn't it? Well, anyway. Yeah, super. You see? Awesome. I talk about their challenges. I talk about the movement to a digital age. I talk about the things that they want to do around innovation. I talk about teams and people. I talk about empiricism, but I talk about it in terms of a hypothesis and value and frequent experimentation and lean startup. I talk about it in terms of entrepreneurism, which is hard to say, so I don't talk about it often like that. I talk about outcomes that they want. I focus on the why, not the how. I say, we know how to do that. Look, you've got teams that can do it. We just need to set them free. We just need to create an environment where success. And your job is to create that environment, right? Mr. C-level. That's all. And to be honest, most people get it now. Most C-levels get it. Now that might be because McKinsey and Boston Consulting Group and Accenture and Deloitte has been banging that drum. It's called new ways of working, or it's called new operating model. McKinsey talks about the operating model. And maybe that's the reason why. But I think they get it. The biggest challenge I have isn't that. The biggest challenge I have is the amorphous blob of middle management. Now, the first rule about any change is you have to understand the other people. So me going in, and I used to do this, I'd go, hey, we want to do Agile. They go, not doing it, don't like it, don't trust them, don't trust the people. We have systems, we have processes, the governance model, CMMI, whatever, SOX, all this crap they throw at me. No. I realized that going in and telling them they're idiots isn't perhaps the best solution. Turns out that just gets their back up. Instead, I describe a future that they're a really active part of. I describe a future where all that experience, all that value that they've learned over their careers can be amplified. And I talk about a future where some of the pain that they have has been removed. The pain of managing people. God, managing people is awful, isn't it? It's awful. People. Like toddlers or kittens. Without the good bits. I talk about that, right? I tell them that there's a future. I don't go in and say you're going to be fired. I get them to help the change. I persuade them that instead of throwing a million roadblocks, I encourage them to find solutions to help their agile, the teams around them to be successful. I massage their ego. I say, you know how to fix this. I use analogies and metaphors and stories that connect to things that they experience. So a great example is, hey, you know Scrum? You know when you had a production problem? Yeah, you know when you were writing code or when you were delivering systems or operating them, so whatever they're doing. You know then you had a production problem, right? You know you got a group of people together and you focused on it and you sort of like broke all the rules to deliver value, deliver that in, and that's how you did it, right? Well, Scrum just sort of makes that the norm, not the exception. And they go, yeah, I've been telling people that for years. They're blooming idiots. And you go, yeah. Can you help us make that work at scale? They go, yeah. And you go, brilliant. And of course, I'm making it really easy for administration. Or they say, this is operations. We can't do continuous delivery. No bloody way. Compliance, governance, security. Do you know how expensive these test systems are and how hard they are to get up and manage? And I'm like, yeah, sure. Totally get that. Nightmare. So last production problem you had, how long did it take you to deliver a fix to market? I assume you have some production problems. Go, oh yeah, they're idiots in development. They always get things wrong. So the last production problem, how long was it? Only 2 hours, right? Yeah, we fixed it, we got it out. Is the system still running afterwards? Oh yeah, we're very robust here. We've got lots, good system. So you can release every 2 hours then? What are you talking about? Well, you just told me that with production problems you can release every 2 hours because of the diligence and processes and expertise that you have. Oh, yeah. So let's help everybody else do that. Oh, we don't trust those people. No, we don't now. But you can help make sure that we do. Well, all right. You can change these people. Don't accept that you can't. You're smart. You can try different things. You can work on them empirically. And try little strategies. You can be Machiavellian. You can buy them drinks, take photos of them naked. Whatever you need to do. Do what you need to do. But you can drive change. It's the art of the possible. Do you know why it is possible? Because of you. Every single person in this room. You can do amazing things. Sometimes it's not going to be easy. Sometimes it's going to be really, really bloody annoying. Sometimes it's like carrying a boulder up a hill and every time you stop it rolls down. But you can do it. I know you can. Any other questions? Gentleman there. Hello. We're doing the beard section and then we'll move over to the...
Is it possible to Six Sigma and Agile work together?
Oh God, Six Sigma. Yeah. It's impossible to do. If you redefine quality. So Six Sigma obviously came out of the lean camp as a mechanism to describe the maniacal focus on quality in the system. So we're working with Toyota at the moment. Toyota are recasting their definition of quality so that when you do continuous process improvement in it, it actually delivers value to customers. So quality mostly in most organizations tends to be free of any defects as specified. That's not quality. That's stuff, that's called it works. Ish. Quality needs to include a customer. Quality needs to describe delivering value to customer, not does what's specified. I have no idea what specified delivers value to a customer. So by recasting the definition of quality, you can then start applying the ideas of Six Sigma as a continuous improvement framework. Yes, there's going to be some things that are challenging around that, but ultimately the Belt model and the Six Sigma, they get it. We're working at the moment in trying to get systems thinking and complexity theory, which is really where Scrum comes from, working together in a more effective way, really just to sort of deal with some of those challenges of terminology. But ultimately, if you focus a black belt on the real outcomes, 5 whys and all those things become natural and actually end up helping you improve the processes. But remind them that it doesn't matter how you work, it matters the thing that you're getting out that matters, If you focus them on that, then you will be successful. These ideas aren't alien to it, however, depending on what they think their objective is. So recast quality, and you get a lot of value out of it, potentially. Potentially. They are a bit of a pain in the ass, aren't they? That's the other thing is, though, giving it a black belt costs so much blooming money that by the time you sort of, I talk about ego, you're like, I'm brilliant because I spent $120,000 on it. And that can sometimes be a problem. Again, turn them into your ally, all that stuff, I guess. Sorry. There's been some stuff written about it.
Yes.
It's going to be interesting. I think it's a bit blah blah, but it's okay. We'll see what happens with the Toyota stuff, because I'm actually very interested in that. I think that could actually help us sort of like unify the dark force and the light force can come together and we can have a sort of indigo force. I don't know. But, because Darth Vader wasn't all bad. He had a great taste in cloaks. And Luke isn't all cool, is he? He was a bit of an idiot with old Yoda. So we have to bring these things together, and I think we could end up with something pretty interesting. Because we need the discipline at scale of systems thinking and some of the ideas of Lean, in that part of Lean. And we need the empiricism. Those two, and we can marry those two things, it could be very powerful. I didn't really answer your question other than quality. Did you have a question?
Yes.
Ask away.
Well,
You have the floor. Oh my God, he's going to get up and start shouting.
well, I'm a tech guy working in a field, a very specialized field. Mostly people don't know about it. So my team.
So I'm going to ask, what is it? Is it something really
AI.
interesting that has to do with
AI.
quality? No. What is it? What is it?
Oh,
What's good?
AI stuff.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So
ultimately, you're trying to replace everybody in this room, right?
yes, I am, and creating Skynet.
I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So we have an AI team, and we have to manage it. How much of the craft the manager needs to know? Does he need to be a AI guy trained to be a manager, or a general good manager?
So I mean, whether it's AI or any specialist, one I really would rather see. Depends on what you're doing with AI. I'd rather see AI sprinkled into lots of places because it has significant value everywhere. So I don't like specialist teams anyway. But ultimately, as a good leader or a good Scrum Master, let's avoid the word manager for a second, I think that ultimately you have to ask the right questions. You have to be very aware of value. And as an AI person, your focus isn't AI, it's about delivering machine learning to business domains, right?
Yeah.
It's about delivering the inspirational thoughts that AI can do into the context of the business problem, right?
Correct.
And so, frankly, I think that your job, the manager's job, or the Scrum Master, or the leader's job is to facilitate that, to help you do that. Not worry about AI, but ultimately, and then your job is to communicate when you have problems, impediments, challenges, risks, to describe that in a way that allows them to understand how it affects the backlog, etc., and affects the flow of work. Not everybody has to be expert in everything. Completely agree.
Yes.
Other than the customer, we all need to grow in our knowledge of the customer.
Of course.
In my opinion, and AI is cool. I don't really understand it, but it looks great.
We also don't.
So 80% of the code written in Google, so I was at Google, 80% of the code written at Google is written by computers now. Now, all right, most of that code is like test harnesses and deployment algorithms and sort of like, you could argue that's whether that's code or not, but it just shows you the power that you get now. Google Translate has written its own language. I don't totally understand how that works, but it's like, been left to its own devices, it's decided to create a language that the people that created it don't understand. That sounds worrying to me. But don't let that concern anybody. What's it saying? I know you Portuguese do this in Portuguese all the time when I'm around. I have no idea, and I don't totally trust you. Where's that bald guy? Why does he keep talking? I know. Right. Cool. Any other questions? There's a question at the back, the lady at the back.
Hello, my name is Erica.
Hello, Erica.
We are from the safety. My pain point right now is dealing with the stakeholders' expectations because we use Scrum in the company, the tech team and the project team. We are very much aligned about the mindset, but our stakeholders are not. So we are often asked about the launch day, the day. So we are trying to manage those expectations by explaining what we are going to deliver in terms of value in the sprint, but that is not enough for them. It's like, give me a day.
So I can give him a date whenever you want. It's an interesting question. By the way, you should have a roadmap. That roadmap should describe a potential day. You just don't commit to what functionality is delivered on that day. You forecast some stuff, and then incrementally you continually update that forecast based on your improved knowledge by delivering working product, or potentially shippable, releasable, product. So ultimately, what I say to my stakeholders is, here's the date based on the current level of knowledge, the current of uncertainty, right? This may, we'll hit the date. We can't promise exactly what's going to be in it. If they could tell us exactly what they wanted in infinite detail, then we could, but they probably don't know either. How about we do this instead? So we have that date. There we go. Then every sprint review, we ask a very simple question. Can we ship yet? And they say, no. And then we say, why? What's missing? And they say, well, you've got to do this, 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 this. Cool. That helps inform our next sprint plan, right? We then do it. We deliver. We say, can we ship yet? They say, no, we've got this, this, this. Say, hang on a minute, that was different from what you said last time. Oh yeah, because I understand this and this now. Interesting. Informs the sprint plan. Can we ship yet? You see that? I'm getting boring, aren't I? I know.
AI can do that.
And we can have a computer tell it how to do this. We'll invent a bot that just continually sits there and goes, can we ship yet? Why not? The idea is to try to get them to think about rapidly, frequently shipping stuff, getting it into customers' hands. Historically, we've spent years telling them that they customers tell us everything that they want. Don't worry about anything. We'll give you an estimate, then we'll deliver. We've always let them down, but that doesn't matter. Now we're actually telling them, we want you, every sprint review or every couple of sprint reviews, to tell us what's missing to release. And let's be creative in terms of, maybe that gives us the opportunity to release a lot earlier by doing some, hey, maybe we only deliver the happy case and we use manual processes around that. Maybe we don't deliver this and this and this. But ultimately, that can you ship yet? Every sprint review, I always ask that. That's brilliant, because it really forces them to think what's missing. Because they want everything. But honestly, 70% of the features that we deliver, according to the Standish Chaos Report, are never or rarely used. Have we seen Excel? Excel is written for this uber amazing mathematician stroke data analyst stroke data manipulator I look at it and I'm like, bloody hell, there's a lot of stuff in here. How many of those features do you use? Very, they build a product for everybody that only one person in the world can use all those features. What's interesting is we can ship.
Who's it?
I don't know. When I meet them, it's going to be awesome. They're probably in Vegas. They're probably in Vegas making a lot of money now. So I'm like, hello, I have an algorithm that does all this. I'm using pivot tables. Who uses? They're just pivot tables are a bit like a secret sort of magic. They're like Harry Potter invention because they're amazing. But I'm not totally sure how they all really work. And when they do work, you're like, and then they stop working for an absolutely random reason. And you spend years trying to work out how it works. It's like a quest, isn't it? It's like some sort of like religious thing that you have to go on occasionally to fix your pivot table. And afterwards, when you get it working, you're like a different person because of it. Anyway, and closer to God and Nirvana and all that stuff. Anyway, I digress. But that's what I do.
They don't really understand what's going on, so they don't really get what is continuous delivery. They want the full.
Well, I think they get continuous delivery. I mean, we continuously deliver. That's brilliant. What are you guys doing? Because we're delivering continuously. I don't use the phrase agile mindset very often because it's like, I don't know, some sort of psychedelic kind of phrase, right? It's like becoming a member of the Beatles at the end of their career. Instead I focus on, hey, it's a complex problem, right? We all get that. We have to use empiricism, complex problem. We have to self-organize, complex problem. That's hard. Let's try to get that instilled into the teams. That requires us to do some stuff, psychological safety, build transparency, do these stupid wall things, get those personas on the board, all that sort of stuff. I sort of concentrate on very practical things, rather than this sort of like agile, like guru, kind of like, ooh, don't look at me, I'm wearing robes kind of thing, As much as it's cool, and that's really the essence of what we're trying to do, and then they often say, hey, this is sort of like a mindset thing, right? And you say, really? I did not know that. I'm just concentrating on empiricism, self-organization, continuous improvement. But ultimately, I don't talk about mindset as a role. But probably, any other questions? Are we done? I don't know. I don't manage my own schedule here. Hello, lady there.
My name is Marina. And
Hello, Marina.
I have a question.
Hello.
How about
sorry.
OKR with Scrum?
OKR.
Like, results.
Surely it makes sense from a value point of view, right?
Yeah, because in the company that I'm working, we are using OKR.
Yeah, as a way of managing.
Yeah, and also we are using Scrum.
Yeah.
So it helps us to achieve our goals of the Scrum as well. So,
Yeah. So ultimately, though, the biggest concern I have with OKR is when they're all very internally focused. When the measures are crap, basically, when you're actually not focusing on the things that are really important. If you're focusing on the things that deliver value to your organization, if you're focusing on the objectives that are really fundamental to your strategy, then it helps us drive Scrum, because that's the way we execute on that. So they're sort of like very supportive, unless they're crap. And then they end up undermining Scrum because they focus on things like process controls. They focus on things like governance, compliance. They focus on, efficiency and stuff like that, like utilization, whatever that means. Resource allocation, loading, stuff like, but as long as they're focused on outcomes that are valuable to the organization and consistent. One of the other issues is that Scrum tends to drive you towards to an integrated organization, meaning business and IT working together in perfect, cats and dogs loving each other, but then that means if the OKRs, if you're developed from that business point of view, then they're perfect. If they're developed as a software factory or as a supporting organization, in response to your customer, then it can get a bit hairy. Do you know what I mean? So if they're bad metrics. Do you agree?
Yeah, we're still, how can I say, learning about OKR. So like, we're still working as like tasks. So it's not the goal. It's like, I mean.
So you still have a separate set of goals. You just have some OKRs off to the right that you're testing to see if they can actually help you, right?
Yeah, but like we want to use the OKR to help us to go to the same goal, you know?
Yeah, to get everybody on the same page, to make sure we're all moving to the same goal.
Like we're still learning, so like instead of doing this like as a goal, we're using it as like a task, you know?
Yeah,
I have
I understand.
like a project, and then I have the tasks of this project.
Ooh, I don't like that.
I don't like it either as well.
That sounds awful. That sounds nasty. I think we should stop doing that. Instead, what I think we should do is we should reform our OKRs about the actual things that are important to the business, to the value that we're delivering. Then suddenly we will find that Scrum can help deliver on those things. That's what I would do. Oh, I don't like OKRs that are all about tasks and outcomes of tasks. And
Me neither, because it's not working if we work like that. But like we're still
sounds
learning,
silly.
you know,
Yeah.
because like
Okay, sorry.
sometimes we don't know how can I say, like how to write a goal, or like you have
Okay.
to think about like where we wanna go.
So it's funny you should say that. The best backlogs, the best PBRs, the best product backlog items are written from guess what perspective? An outcome perspective. So you describe your backlog not in terms of work, your product backlog, obviously your sprint backlog's a little different, but your product backlog not in terms of work, but in terms of the outcomes that you're trying to achieve. Those outcomes then, the team then works out what the best way of delivering on those outcomes are. So you become outcome-centric, which looks remarkably like OKRs. So there's a great relationship. Sorry, you keep me on. Sorry. I have no idea why you're recording this. It's going to be
recording.
Strange YouTube group. Like a bald Englishman group. I love that group. Patrick Stewart, me. Right. So I think there's a good, so bottom line is, I think there's synergy. I think you have to watch for what you're measuring. Watch what your objectives are, and then what your measures are that are associated with that. If you focus them on good, clear outcomes that are of value, then Scrum fits perfectly. If you focus them on work, then it doesn't. But it's hard. Cool. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Hello. Gosh, am I ever getting out of here? Is this like going to be 10 o'clock?
As it says, Scrum Guide, it's only 16 pages.
I think.
But
I don't know what it is in Portuguese. In German, it's like 28 pages. With no spaces.
And I understand that what's in the book in Scrum Guide is what's essential to execute the framework.
Yeah.
But when the middle management and the C-levels read these pages and don't find a role for
that guy.
Then they buy safe,
what's my
right?
role on all this? Is there something like a board of knowledge for the leadership on agile transformation? Because there's a lot of
Interesting
fear.
question.
There are a lot of fear involved when I don't have my role described on this framework.
Actually, it's bizarrely on the drive down here, because we had a lot of time in the car, as we always do, we were talking about that. So we were talking about actually describing, so over the last few days, I've spent a lot of time talking about enterprise agility. I haven't really talked about Scrum once. I mean, I sort of mentioned it in my title, but that's about it, as I mentioned earlier. What's interesting about, because they don't care about Scrum. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they don't really care. Hello. They don't really care about Scrum. What they care about is the ability to respond to their market. They care about agility, right? So I don't care if they don't understand Scrum. What I care about is, do they understand business agility, and what are the things that they have to think about in terms of organizational, the stuff I just talked about there. Well, the concept of community, the concept of squads or teams aligned to value streams, the KPRs, the measures, those sort of things are the things that are important. I think we need to bring all that together for them and say, oh, by the way, your teams are going to be using Scrum. Who cares? It's kind of irrelevant. It is to them. They don't care. They're like, great, sounds awesome. What I care about is delivering customer value, and I care about business agility, and I care about risk, and I care about where people are going to be and how they're going to be supported in the future. I think it's time to write that piece, which we haven't done a good job. At the moment, it's fragmented in multiple pieces in many places. So I think that's something that we need to do. So thank you for your feedback. It's on the backlog. And we all know what that means, right? We're never gonna get it done. I love the backlog. It's a great. Yeah, I'm not telling you when. Talk to that lady over there. She doesn't like giving dates for releases. Yeah. This is Scrum. What are you on about?
I'm also a project manager.
Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, you're the project managers. That's why they don't get invited to parties. I think. Have we got any more questions or? Oh, this young, good-looking gentleman at the front. This is the last question. Apparently, that's my handler. He looks like he's my concierge, doesn't he?
Okay, so with an ever-changing world, and with so many types of skills to learn, how can one decide just to go through one route? As you mentioned earlier, with your picture, there's the technical way, the product way, and so how can one be supposed to choose only one of them when the world is such a plural world and we have to talk to each other and whichever way we choose.
So
I kind of.
Where do we? Yes, I understand your question. Love. I think that you know what really excites you. You might have to have some help. It's not one thing. Wow, these weirdos. I think the young people, millennials, Generation Z.
I was born in 95. Not Z.
Oh, so you
Not
are a
yet.
millennial, yeah. So, that's an interesting question. What happens if all of them tickle your fancy? It's a bit like dating. At a certain point, you have to make a choice. You can't do everything. You can stay interested in everything. There's no reason. This isn't, you can actually, unlike marriage, you can become a Mormon. You can have multiple wives. But this isn't going well. I'm going to move out of that analogy and move off it. But ultimately, I think you do end up focusing on one passion. And it might just be for now. It might be because of the situation you're in, the opportunity that you're working. It might be that at the moment, you're working in a particular area that really needs a Scrum Master. And you're kind of interested in it. So let's give it a go. Let's focus on those skills. Let's focus on coaching, facilitation, the stances that Barry's so famous for. Let's focus on those things and get really good at that. And then maybe you do that for a bit and you realize that isn't for you, or that opportunity sort of like changes and you move somewhere else and you're like, and maybe as a hobby you still do some technical stuff. Maybe you are interested in the product still. Ultimately though, I think you only achieve mastery in one at a time. I think it's very hard to become good at everything. You might be able to, but my experience would indicate that you tend to want to focus on one thing. Because there's a really good resource on scrum.org called the Scrum Master Digital Learning Path. It talks about the competences and focus areas that we think Scrum Master behaviors that Scrum Masters need. We think. And we have some opinion on it. So there's a lot of stuff in there. Like 500 different web articles, links to books. If you did the whole thing, it would probably take you like 2 or 3 years of work, So I think you have to focus to become a master of something. Now, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you can do everything. You've got a lot of energy, maybe you can. But I'm a big fan of focusing on at the moment and then moving on to something else. But you can change. It's not forever, right? You always get divorced. No, sorry, that analogy has got horrible. I'm not going to do that again. Does that sort of answer your question? But I love your enthusiasm. It's a very grown-up thing to say, notice? Cool. Thanks. Okay, that was it. Sorry. That was it, wasn't it? That was the end. I'm going to do this. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.
Pessoal, a gente